The clip being commented on here in this video is the intellectual property of the honey badger. The views expressed in this video are the intellectual property of the laughing ogre and are no way meant to reflect the views or ideas of any sane human being. Now sit back and relax because we have a treat for you on the channel today. The honey badger joins the laughing ogre. Well, this is something brand new for me. It's good to see you out there, YouTube. I'm going to try to do a little response video, see if it doesn't work out. This was brought to my attention by somebody that I like very much, but because of my opinions on the subject, I'm going to keep their name to myself. So let's listen to this person for a minute, shall we?
This Monday, tragedy struck Quebec City. A gunman opened fire on a mosque, killing 6 and wounding 19 men. My heart goes out to the people affected by this tragedy. I hope you see justice done and find peace.
Well, as do I. But I must say that right now that if you're going to go out and you're going to murder people and your gurus and imams and your leaders of your religious sect and your cult, not basically, your cult are going to tell you to murder people in Allah's name and that you can't draw a picture of Muhammad, it's asking for all kinds of trouble. So my heart goes out to him too. Don't get me wrong. To anyone that dies for anything other than old, it's a tragedy.
I remember learning about the tragedy in Quebec City and seeing all the narrative peddling that sprung up almost immediately afterwards and thinking, 6 people are dead. What kind of individual hears that and immediately starts asking themselves, how can this benefit my belief system?
Well, let's ask ourselves what kind of jerk-off would look at a Muslim going in and blowing themselves up, running a car, truck through people, running a car into people like Ohio State, a truck like in Nice or Berlin, machete, chop, like in the Louvre just recently. Let's look at how people run around and say, ooh, not all Muslims, not all Muslims. It's starting to look like an awful lot of Muslims at the very, very, very least. So I want to give this person the benefit of the doubt, but what I've watched so far, this person right here is what I would call a Muslim apologist.
The first draft of this was written before the tragedy in Quebec City. It features a somewhat scathing indictment of Puritanism based on ethnicity or race and how it cannibalizes national spirit. Ironic, since apparently the gunman was far-right and anti-immigration, at least when it comes to Quebec nationalism.
Well, you see, you found one righty, and they do, and you got to ask yourself who put him up to it. Well, let's let this intelligent person continue with their self-entitled shit show.
Now, I still expect immigrants to love the country they immigrate to. The liberal expectation of opening your arms to even those who loathe what you stand for is also cannibalizing the national spirit. Anyway, I wanted to get a word about this tragedy in before men's rights activists get blamed for the shooting, and we will, because why not? If a man does something bad in the name of an ideology, of course the people who oppose defining men by how they serve ideologies are to blame. And speaking of men serving ideologies, let's get on with finding out why our world is going to shit.
Well, most of the time, it's because of a dogma of one type or another. In this case, the worst dogma I know of, a horrifying, terrible, terrible institution that teaches people to, you, the way you're dressed right there, they would want to throw acid on your face or beat you if you were caught like that in public. Any place they would have Sharia law, that is their intention, whether it's there or here. Well, if you go to London right now, they're trying to enforce Sharia law. I don't think it'll be long before Englishmen stand up to that. There's places in Texas. I don't want to do a lot of name dropping, but there is a lady named Based Mama, and I don't have any way of what should I say, vetting her claims and what she says. But let me put it this way: if she's totally fake, she makes some really good points. I'm going to let this person go for a minute longer. Citing conflict to rule or why
legitimacy
our world
of
is
authority
going
can
to
come in
shit.
2 flavors. The first is inspiration, inspiring people with a sense of shared purpose, a unified destiny, a great work.
What if they're inspiring people to go murder folks in Allah's name?
The second is using conflict in order to legitimize your rulership. It's the oldest trick in the book, and it works like this. You incite a conflict between Team Blue and Team Red, and then you swoop in, and with your great wisdom and beneficence, you solve the conflict you incited in the first place.
Wow, she's talking about the Hegelian dialectic. I've done no prep on this. So, I might have jumped the gun, man. Maybe this chick really knows what she's talking about. Let's see what she has to say further. This is the Hegelian dialectic she's talking about.
And because you are able to resolve the conflict, you are able to justify your rulership over both. Yay!
Oh, man.
When a society goes...
In other words, you want to impose strict, search and seizure procedures and just searches at the airport or wherever. And so Americans don't want it. And so, some planes run into buildings. Next thing you know, they're begging you for it. It's called problem, reaction, solution, or thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, if you want to be really specific. And again, this is from memory from the old bean, but I've studied this stuff for years. If I want you to do what I tell you to do, I make you afraid. So let's let her continue.
Goes from being governed by inspiration and shared purpose. Maybe the moment we go from electing someone we admire to electing the lesser of two evils. Ultimately, it doesn't matter the conflict, just as long as the population is invested in it. In fact...
Hey, listen, before I let her go on, that's a good point. Now, I voted for one particular way. In fact, I voted for the winner, coincidentally. And it wasn't because I thought he was the lesser of two evils, because I thought he was a great person. It was insane. Watch my video about Trump, and is Trump a psychopath? I mean, my conclusion is he's a lot of id. He's all id. So psychopath, no. Perfectly mentally stable, I would say maybe. I'm not a licensed psychologist, so I can't say, but I would say, in my opinion, maybe. But a little unhinged, sleep deprived and workaholic, type A personality, probably washed his hands too much. He admits that stuff himself. He's a nutcase. Look what he's doing right now. Busily doing everything he promised, and they don't like it.
The ruling body will simply shape the conflict to whatever social and technological features there exist of the time. Tribal conflicts, ethnic conflicts, and now this relatively new idea spawned by mass media, ideological conflicts.
Wow, man, I hope she goes where I think she's going with this. If so, I'm not going to edit it, because it'll just show that you can't judge a book by its cover, and I will end up saying who sent this to me, because it's a very intelligent young lady.
The ultimate point is to keep the people invested in the conflict so the government can swoop in and resolve it, thus maintaining its authority over its whole population. Realize this. Our conflicts, the conflicts of the plebeians, do not benefit us. They benefit the lawmakers, they benefit the religious hierarchy, they benefit the bureaucrats, they benefit the tax collectors, they benefit the tyrants.
Ooh.
They do not benefit us. In fact, they are the means by which we are ruled.
Man.
Our conflicts are our cage and our shackles.
Man, preach it, sister.
The discerning viewer may have already recognized something familiar here. Yep. The American government uses ideological conflict to justify itself. Well, every government does.
Yeah.
We need the conservative man and the liberal man to always be at each other's throats.
We do.
So the government can incite, contain, and resolve the conflict in a ritual display.
Yeah.
Since liberal and conservative man can't resolve their own ideological conflicts, the government will do it for them. That process legitimizes the government and government control over all of us. And now, this age-old trick and its mass media ideological twist has encountered the internet with a completely different set of social rules.
Old versus
the
new
real
media.
conflict now is between people invested in online media as a source of information and people still invested in old media and their online presence as authoritative. The powers that be have noticed this new potential source of conflict and have already moved to exploit it for legitimacy. Notice how things have polarized. Old media is left, new media is right. The powers that be have managed to transplant their old ideological conflict onto this new battleground. Or maybe it's just human nature. Who knows? The battle between Trump and Hillary was less a battle between right and left, and more a battle between old and new media. The powers that be are trying to lock up the power of the internet by reframing the debate between new and old as left and right. The right wing talks about obscenity, the left wing talks about objectification, the right wing talks about the war on children, the left wing talks about the war on women.
Yeah.
And now we have an old left-wing press and a new right-wing press.
Listen, I retract everything I said earlier. It'll probably be edited out by the time you see this. This woman knows what she's talking about. thus far. This is the Hegelian dialectic at the height of its, of its application in society. And if you ask me, it's, this is some deep stuff, and we should all be paying attention to this thing.
And what happened to just the press? Have we just given up on that notion? Journalistic ethics, neutrality, research. Is that where we're at? There's only two sources of information, both of which are ideological. Fake news is a symptom of this polarization of the narrative, plus the increasingly divisive influence of online puritanical communities. These separate online communities will grab up any scrap that proves their worldview and will race it like wildfire.
She might end up saying it's called cherry picking your argument. I thought I was cherry picking an argument here, kind of, but I don't like to, if I do this, I'm going to jump into it. I hear somebody start to say something, see a provocative title, I'm going to jump into it. So I probably will leave my thoughts up because it serves as a lesson to myself and everybody. Don't always just judge before you hear somebody out. I should have heard this lady out. I'm going to do the same thing I did before, to kind of accentuate where her face is there. Listen to her.
Through their ranks, no matter how false or absurd, because they do not check their facts. Here's an example. A true alternative media starts by scraping out an audience on the cheapest platform possible. Plagued with technical difficulties, it slowly and painfully grows, suffering continuous setbacks, slowly scraping together an audience. It does not start with a technical staff, a fully equipped studio, millions of dollars of revenue, and gain an audience in the hundreds and thousands or the millions almost overnight.
Oh man, don't I know it. Some people get lucky, hit the right algorithm, but man, you struggle. You do what you got to do.
Understanding that, consider how truly alternative what we label alternative is. I'll come back to this point and clarify it later on.
There's a little jump there because I needed to get some agua. While we continue to listen to this lady, I backed it up just a touch. Let's see what she has to say.
Is. I'll come back to this point and clarify it later on. And one of the main problems with transplanting that old manufactured ideological conflict is that this new social media battlefield intensifies it beyond anything in history. The new rules of social media. 1. The backfire effect. Studies into partisan psychology show that being told facts contrary to your viewpoint can serve to harden your attachment to it.
Well, that's very true. I'm going to let her continue to rant here, but that's very true. If you feed somebody facts that has a set dogma, you're probably going to strengthen that dogma, that embrace of what they believe as opposed to the facts that you show them.
Social media, we are in near constant contact with people who believe things we do not, and thus are throwing facts at us do not accord with our belief systems. In the process, our belief systems are hardened ever more, and our ideological divisions become far more stark. 2. The effortless purge. Due to the ease of purging unbelievers, all that's required now is a ban or a block, not a bullet. Communities can go through successive waves of purges, each creating a more purified social consensus.
Wow. Agenda 21, anybody?
3. Social consensus junk food. Because you can spend your time among people who think in ways absolutely identical to you, social media exploits the instinct to adhere to social consensus more thoroughly than any other media in history. This makes it addictive to people with a high desire to conform to social consensus and increases the power of social consensus to force people to conform. 4. Brighter lights create darker shadows. Existing in an online community with people who think exactly like you do leads to very little positive social contact with people who don't, assisting in the process of demonization of anyone who doesn't believe as you do. As the us becomes more and more narrowly defined, the them becomes more evil. You get lazy. Number 5. Living in a bath of people who think exactly like you allows your compromise and reason muscles to atrophy. You get lazy.
She's telling you some serious stuff here. You want a diversity of ideas, a diversity of people, all celebrating a culture. I mean, listen to what she's saying. They all should embrace a particular culture. And, man.
Lazy and defensive about your choice to be essentially stupid. In combination with the addictiveness of high-grade social media consensus, you can easily slip into self-righteousness in the face of people who think differently.
Yeah, and end up going out and burning down, little hot dog. They kept calling it a vehicle, but, it makes me think of the Anchorman where they're like, he's starting the cable news and it's just a car chase and they're like, speculate on what might be happening. And anyway, if you haven't seen the Anchorman 2, go watch it. But this is what she's, describing.
Seeing them as a devil for doing so is much easier than exercising your flabby reasoning muscles to move your fat ass opinion.
Man, that's some heavy stuff. If you just surround yourself in an echo chamber, because I actually, that's why I want to leave it up. I started this thinking I was going to disagree with this person. So really, this is an exercise in what she's saying not to do, but good points she's making, and maybe I can throw in some myself.
6. You hate too easily. Polarizing opinions give us a way to filter through all the potential contacts possible online and rapidly sort them into us versus them. The sheer amount of people on the internet may make this a necessary thing so that some people avoid going insane. We're only really meant to be able to keep track of about 250 people, and now we have to deal with the pressure of potential contact with millions and millions. 7. You get a constant exposure to the victim, to the people that your ideology has identified as the victim.
Ooh.
Constant exposure to their pain and suffering.
That's important.
Outrage.
I say it in one of my videos, you know, they show you the babies in Africa and whatnot with flies around their eyes and stuff so they can get money from you so they can keep 98 cents in a dollar. You know, they saturate you with the victimhood of whatever they're pushing.
Culture. All of these features lead to the rise of super Puritan communities, something never before seen or dealt with in terms of historical conflict resolution.
How to resolve ideological conflict before? How did we?
National pride, patriotism brings a country together. It inspires love and brothership in its citizens. It is a true leadership because it's a shared purpose. It's a shared social consensus. By definition, a shared social consensus between people who think differently and are different. Different beliefs, different political ideologies, different ethnicities, different races. Ever since the Sabine and Roman tribe laid down their arms and joined in a common purpose, nationalism has been a triumph of diversity.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
It's dying. It's dying because...
But listen carefully what she said, diversity, but everybody... coming together under one banner. That's important. Where are the Native Americans? You know, I shouldn't laugh when I say that. Where are the Native Americans? They've been pushed into reservations because we did not assimilate. I see no wigwams. No tom-toms are playing through the night with bonfires and braves and squaws around them, chanting rhythmically, working themselves up into a fever pitch for the hunt. It's gone, man. We didn't assimilate. It's gone. And listen.
It can't compete. It can't compete with the purified social consensus possible on the internet. A consensus created by hundreds of thousands of people thinking absolute lockstep and purging themselves of anyone with the slightest difference. To consensus-based thinkers, their online world is more real than the real world. And in the real world, they are triggered by anything but the most absolute agreement.
And is that not perfect? Absolute agreement, or they go nuts because they're the kind of people that, you know, just somebody on Twitter, I'm definitely not going to mention their name, I ended up blocking them. But for my own sake, not theirs. You know, I was winning, and therefore, you know, they actually started right off the bat with how dumb I was and what my mother must do at the truck stop. If anybody's going to talk bad about my mom, it'll be me. I just put a video up about her. But, again, I don't want to get in this lady's way. Let's let her finish. We're 9 minutes into a 30-minute video here.
Online world. How do you generate a sense of shared purpose between these communities laboring under an impenetrably powerful social consensus created by social media? And it's not just the left. It's happening on the right as well. Tying national spirit to race or ethnicity or even place of birth means that certain groups cannot take part in loving what America stands for, or Canada, or England. There can be no coming together when the lines are drawn based on geography or genealogy rather than nationality. Prior to this age, we could rely on community, family, a sense of shared purpose to quell the conflict, not just the government's ritual combat between two parties. Now we have none of that. Just more and more people addicted to the kind of absolute social consensus that can only be found on the internet.
Heavy stuff. And we differ there a little bit, but I'm not going to beat her up after what I said at the beginning and had no idea where she was going. So continue, ma'am.
The powers that be are playing with fire.
I just want to check this person's name. Oh, this is Honey Badger. Okay, I've not heard of you, Honey Badger, but I will start to listen. I'm gonna, in fact, watch this. I'll do it right here. I just hit your sub button. This is good stuff. So let me put you back up to full and let you continue.
They are now inciting a conflict that they likely cannot contain, and we will all eventually be burnt. What I'm seeing is Republicans proposing laws to control super Puritan behavior on the left, even calling for censorship or violence. Same thing on the other side. None of this will recreate a sense of shared purpose, and without a shared purpose, you're stuck with conflict resolution of escalating levels of severity, tyrannical laws, draconian police action, martial law.
Yeah.
Consider that the more violent this ideological conflict, the more authoritarian your government is justified in becoming to resolve it.
Now listen, I don't know where she's going with this. I'm not saying there's going to be martial law tomorrow, and watch, I bet she's not either. But what is the end? What is the end? When we know that you go and you talk about Agenda 21, when the Georgia Guidestones are there, when you, man, when all this stuff is there for anybody to look into, you know, look into the Bilderbergers, look into the Club of Rome, look into them. Look into it. It'll take you, if you're anything like me, I've been looking into it since 2008, and I'm a newbie. So look into it.
Always ask, who benefits most from this conflict? Who incited it? Who keeps pouring gasoline on the fire?
Who benefits?
And even more importantly, what is the anatomy of this conflict? How is it created? How is it maintained?
Man,
how do we
who's
get
doing
rid
it?
of it?
How do we get rid of it? Man, that's good stuff. She's on.
So let's go there. Let's look at where the conflict comes from.
Let's do it.
There's a historical corner case that illuminates how you can manipulate identity to create a class of people who aren't legally owned, can own property, even be appointed president, well, vizier, and yet still be slaves.
Vizier.
Slaves that can be trusted to run an empire for their masters. The historical case was during the Ottoman Empire. The group was called the Janissaries, and they proved you could manipulate a man's identity to turn him into the perfect slave.
Without knowing and no research, I'm pretty sure Janus is the two-faced god.
The kind of slave so enslaved you can hand him the reins of your empire, and all he'll do is run it for your benefit. What the Ottoman Turks did is this. They would go to Slavic countries and steal the sons of Christian slaves. They would then force march them hundreds of miles back to the heart of the Ottoman Empire.
I know this is true.
7 10-year-old boys, force marched, starved to death in ditches, dropped dead of exhaustion, and those that survived will be brainwashed into believing in Islam.
Look it up. I know it's true.
Not only could these Janissaries be relied upon to do much of the work to run the empire that stole them in the first place, but they effectively ruled it and went back to the Christian communities they came from and could be relied upon to put down insurrections by murdering their former kin. Essentially, this process manipulated the Janissaries' sense of self. The excised Christian self, the younger Christian self, was immoral, impure, degraded, and also weak, and constantly at war with a new identity as a Muslim. That war created a creature invested in proving himself worthy by service to the pure, the born Muslims. In turn, the native-born Ottoman Turks fought bitter competitions with each other, but when they were challenged as a group, they came together to defend their pure, shared identity. This manipulation of identity created one class of Muslim that served and another class with an internally consistent identity that was served. When you wound a child's sense of self, they will spend the rest of their lives trying to stitch themselves back together. Wound them in the right way, and they will spend their lives stitching together an empire.
Wow. That's heavy stuff. I'm actually going to take a little break right here and see how long this is, because I've never used XSplit, and I hear it takes a lot of space up. I also want to make sure that I turn the right mic off and that my vocals are pretty good. My sound is good. So hang in there, and we'll be right back. And now, continuing right where we left off, as if nothing happened.
The Ottoman Empire created a slave class they could invest the running of their entire society to, and it lasted longer than most empires. The Janissaries are ultimate in slavecraft. No society has superseded the Ottoman Empire in their ability to manipulate identity to compel service. Until now.
Ooh. Where it goes.
Most people don't know, but man was originally completely gender neutral. In fact, its gender neutral aspect wasn't even considered controversial until feminists started to complain in the late 20th century. The original term for adult human male was wereman. It may have come from the Latin vir, as in virtue and virility, both of which originally referred to the manliness of a man. Like the Janissaries, men occupy a shaky position identity-wise. This is obvious when you look at terms like be a man or real man. The male identity is conditional on service.
Well, yeah, and I would also say that as jobs have changed, we shift like level of importance of job based on whether or not men do it. So I mean, I don't know. It's all kinds of reasons for that I could get into, but apparently we're going to hear his side of this one.
It took me a long time to figure out the cognitive logic as to why weremen disappeared. Wu, as in woman, designates the gender-neutral man as female. And it still denotes, to this day, a legitimate occupation or value. Women
Woo man, like a womb?
give birth, they raise children, they manage the home. Where, as in wereman, stopped denoting a legitimate occupation or value in about the 11th to 13th centuries. Suspiciously, this occurred only in cultures.
It's flu season here in Ogreville. I'm just getting over one. I'm trying to keep it down to a minimum.
Where a virgin birth, mythos, and the devil rod introduced sin to the act of conception.
Well, and that goes back to Tammuz, and that goes back to, Sargon of Akkad names himself after the first deified human that I know of. His name was Nimrod, and it's Semiramis and Tammuz. And Tammuz, after he died on his 21st birthday, or he was 21 anyway, I believe, he went out to slay the boar, like his father was a mighty hunter before God, is what was said, and the boar slew him. So you have this myth that goes right on through many myths, but I have my own ideas about that too. I know that there's one myth that is older than all of them. Research it yourself, so I'm not telling you which one it is.
Thus, man is simply someone who does the prefix. Without a prefix, man is worthless. However, there may be an invisible implication to man, which is person who needs to do something to earn value, which explains the real man and be a man rhetoric whenever a person wants a man to do something to serve their interests. And that's why as Warren Farrell observes, men are replaced with occupations to humanize them and to get people to give a shit.
Well, I don't know, man. I can't argue with that. I can say right now I don't agree with everything she's saying. I've made some points, but I can't disagree with what she just said. Men, definitely. You ask a guy, who are you? Or, they say, well, I'm an electrician. And sometimes you ask a woman, in fact, a lot of times in my experience, and a lot of interaction with human beings, ask a woman, about themselves, and they don't say, well, I'm a plumber or whatever. They say, well, I'm a mother, I have a husband, they talk about their personal lives as identifying them. That's very true. I can't argue. And that's just to get so people give a crap about men. Well said, Honey Badger.
People care when they hear 100 firefighters died or 100 miners are trapped. But when they hear 100 men killed, they don't care.
Man, I don't care less, maybe a little less. But I don't know. Let's see what road she's going down. But I think people care. But I get what she's saying. She's right, because then they connect the loss not only with the people and the gender, but they connect it with what they were bringing to society. That's pretty poignant.
Perhaps they even think, if those men didn't have occupations to make them worth anything, they were just a drain on society. We should throw a party. 100 leeches are dead. Women are very much gender specific because their use and value is gender specific. Women can be firemen, policemen, statesmen, X-men, because they can, in addition to their woo value, earn additional occupational value. But they can't be men because they can't lose the value of their woo prefix. It was modern feminists who became disgusted with the idea that man...
Even though I'm agreeing with her here, just remember that everyone has opinions and conclusions. This is a very persuasive person, very confident person, and obviously educated in this vein. When she was talking about the Ottomans, as someone that was involved in... I'll just leave it at clergy, and I was a member of the clergy for a while. I had to study all from Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, even back to Egypt, all the way to the 10 divisions of Europe, and learned about Charlemagne and all the people that tried to unify Europe, Napoleon and Adolf Hitler, and the European Union that's shaped like the Tower of Babel. Anyway, I'm going to let her continue. I just want to say this, because I am agreeing so much with this person, Make sure you do your research and you don't just agree because I say so, or she's a slick talker, because I might be slick talking you. You never know. Go check me out. Check up on what I say.
Was the generic because they misunderstood what men actually stood for. Feminists do this a great deal. They can read female victimhood into anything, including a linguistic trick that deprives men of any innate worth for being adult human males. Man means person who takes their value from their prefix and applies equally to males and females. It's just that females can't have their prefix taken away because they were born with it. And the reason why man is now associated with adult males is because they're the only ones in society who earn an identity through service and have nothing of value through birth. Interestingly enough,
heavy.
the loss of wereman coincides with
That's heavy. I'm going to let her go on with this loss of wereman idea. In fact, I'll back her up a little bit and let her continue from where she wanted to. But, man, that's deep. And I don't, we lived in a matriarchy forever. And with all this patriarchy stuff, they're trying to take it away. Listen to some of the videos. I won't just puke it up here ad nauseum. I tell you, in the old West, man, you didn't ruffle a woman. They made the rules about cussing and where you could smoke and where you put your hat and what you did inside. And if you didn't do right, they'd knock you upside the face with a broom. If you didn't like it, you dare not lay a hand on a woman. You'd get hung.
and have nothing of value through birth. Interestingly enough, the loss of wereman coincides with the rise of two traditions, chivalry and courtly love. Courtly love is a knight chastely worshipful of his lady, and of course, chivalry includes, even from the beginning, a great deal of service, consideration, and protection of women. Now, what happens when you remove a janissary's childhood Christian identity and brainwash him into Islam?
Oh, what happens?
What happens when he's taught to regard Islam as pure? What happens when
women.
he comes to regard his own people as a threat to that purity? He becomes an impure Muslim. And that sense of impurity makes him a driven man with a secret self-loathing and something to prove. He becomes a man who goes back to his own men he no longer recognizes as human because they're outside of his ideology, and slaughters them. What happens when you remove weremen? What happens when boys are taught to regard girls as pure? What happens when boys are taught that they are dangers to girls' purity? What does a boy become? He becomes a man who goes to other men he no longer recognizes as human because they're outside of his ideology, and slaughters them. The more men and boys are shamed, the more they have to prove. The more they have to prove, the bigger the ideological conflict. The bigger the ideological conflict, the more legitimacy our collective governments get in resolving it.
I gotta say right now, and this is not the only angle they have, people. They have many angles they come at us with. This is one of many. She's just making a good point that this is one that has been being cultivated for centuries. I think she said it in this video of hers. I believe it's the longest reigning of the major kingdoms of the world. And, well, and you know what? I'm saying, in fact, you notice in what I said before, I left out the great Chinese, the great dynastic, history that they had there, because, from my point of view, whenever I was deep in that study, it didn't coincide with Daniel and Revelation and these things in the Jewish text. Well, let me let this lady finish up here.
Millions of dollars are poured into campaigns to teach men and boys that they are the single biggest threat to the one thing they are taught to save, that they are impure, unlovable, deplorable, debased, over and over again, whipped by shame for being male. It's a perfect system. You shame men into slaying monsters by telling them they are the monster that needs to be slain. And all of this suffering just to pit men against each other, so our governments can justify themselves by pulling them apart. Of course, the downside to all this is that those men who act out this ideological conflict through violence. But that's just collateral damage for the government and media and academia.
Man, that's
all
true.
Collateral damage for the powers that be.
Oh, that's so true. Whether you like it or not, Stalin, Uncle Joseph, gets credit for saying, one death is a tragedy, a million, a statistic. Whether or not he actually said that, there was a reporter that says he did, and that yes, it was said before. But when you agree with something like that, I mean, the person that was arguing with me about that would have argued that, Donald Trump is a racist, a Nazi. So you have to put it in perspective. Continue, Honey Badger, if you will.
That the only group that's calling the powers that be out for their bullshits, gory harvest, us, men's rights activists, are the one group inevitably have fingers pointed at them to be blamed for it. Conservative and liberal men need each other, but they are never going to work together as long as they need to serve, to fight the shame, and as long as they need to be a hero to save the damsel. As long as they need each other to play the villain. The bigger the villain, the bigger the hero.
Man.
More and more it grows and grows and grows. Not only will they not work together, but the force multiplier of social media means that they are rapidly losing the ability to regard each other as human at all. And social media allows for absolute purity of thought, a shining beacon of complete social consensus for social consensus-based thinkers. And the shadows grow darker and the battles more pitched.
Wow.
How the fuck did this happen?
Tell me.
We are a self-domesticating species. We manage to find all sorts of bizarre and outlandish equilibriums with no apparent conscious effort. It might be entirely possible for us to have arrived at this place without any intent whatsoever. However, there is the possibility that this was intentional. Consider the role feminism plays in all this, in maintaining the conflict by shaming men. Shame that spurs them into fighting each other for a positive identity as hero. Generating the ideological conflict whose resolution is the defining feature that legitimizes our so-called democracy, our so-called free society.
When the story broke that I had for 4 years been a Central Intelligence agent, I was demonstrating outside the Pentagon underneath Mr. McNamara's office against bombing in Vietnam. And this didn't precisely fit with the image of a CIA agent, but then neither does the CIA.
Just saying. Now, here be the thing. Remember when I said how alternative is our alternative media? And I explained how a true alternative would struggle to find an audience? I'm sure a few of you said, well, Allison, that's rather self-serving. Maybe Honey Badger Radio is just a slightly shit. Well, you might be right. Don't ascribe to malice that which is adequately explained by you being slightly shit.
It's good stuff.
However, there's more than just that in determining...
I'm sorry, that's funny. Hey, listen, I hope you get a chance to see this or at least watch part of it, because I don't think you're poo at all. You're doing really good. And if nothing else, you make some really solid statements and arguments. Continue, Honey Badger.
What is and is not alternative. Do the media sources we currently label alternative exploit the same dynamic of that of the government? Do they exploit men's need for an identity by giving them a villain to slay and a damsel to save? Do they exploit junk gender roles? Do they women worst and trot out female victims, using a group of women, any group of women, and then go ballistic when you ask them to prove their X is greater than Y assertion? If they do, they're not alternative. Just like Wendy's isn't really an alternative to McDonald's, it's selling the same thing. It's exploiting the same instincts for fat and sugar. It's not an alternative, it's just a less popular version of fast food. Likewise, there are also just more or less popular ways to exploit men's need to serve an ideology in the wake of being stripped of an identity. There are just more or less popular ways of selling junk gender roles.
Why should you care? Well,
now why should you care? Because no matter what your ideology is, you are going to fail. The only winner here is the House. It's not the left, it's not the right. It's not conservatives, it's not liberals. It's not libertarians, it's not even feminists. The only winner at the end of the day is whoever's in it for power.
That's
and power
deep stuff.
alone. Now, let's set aside arguing about socialized medicine. Let's set aside roads, schools, taxes, family values, civil rights, immigration. Let's set aside all of our fights that those who crave power are only too happy to use against us.
Yeah.
Let's think for a moment how much the government spends on inciting, containing, and resolving the ideological conflicts fracturing our society. Imagine how much more financially efficient the government would be without this ideological gridlock plaguing its operations. When we talk about reducing government spending and control, this is the place to start. Because I think we can all agree, it's shit to be made the butt of a joke.
Yeah,
we are all the butt of this joke.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
And it's even more shit to be taxed in order to be made the butt of the joke.
Yeah, by men with guns, to quote Stefan Molyneux, and obviously with Mrs. Badger. Thanks.
If you're a minarchist, you need to start asking why we have these ideological conflicts. If you're a libertarian, you need to ask how much does it cost to sustain this conflict. If you're a socialist, ask yourself what the government could be spending on besides this. If you're a liberal, consider how much the government is sacrificing of our well-being and our civil rights to force us into conflict.
If you're an anarcho-capitalist, ask yourself why you would want anything like this going on, ruining your life and getting in the way of making money and serving your community.
If you're a conservative, this conflict is the one thing that will destroy the fragile order created by national pride and patriotic spirit. If you're pro-family, consider that big box feminism has torn families apart by demonizing men. Until you fight back against the propaganda labeling men as the biggest threat to women, any pro-family platform will die, stillborn. If you're a Trump supporter, if Trump is the anti-establishment candidate, he would be all for this because it will crack the establishment wide open. If you're a feminist, hear this. Big box feminism has ultimately created two gender roles, men who do and women who are done to. At least men are slaves in this system. Women are made even less by it. Women are made into chains.
Man, that's...
shackles. If you're a gamer-gator, stay tuned, because you're going to discover why the media had a 2-year hysterical meltdown over what was basically a tiny, insignificant, minuscule scandal that should have been...
Well, I'm not a gamer-gator, so I'm going to stop it right there and maybe throw my 2 cents in. It was some deep stuff. Listen, the Hegelian dialectic goes so much deeper and further than this, though. This is one branch. Go lay down, go lay down. This is one branch of many. This is one problem of many that need to be addressed. Is this fourth wave feminism to... I hadn't really known. Maybe I don't like to get into this stuff. So, but I just heard the Prince of Queens talking about fourth wave feminism, and if you go to his channel, you'll see he's all about it. And then this is Honey Badger here, just coming out and saying, "Look, don't fall into this mess." And I'm gonna say it. Look, go listen to the Hard Bastard. He'll tell you the same thing, man. This SJW stuff has gotten out of hand, and it is time that we got our minds together, and we figured out, what do we want for the future. And millennials, young people, Drunken Sailor, who is the one that turned me on to this video right here. You are the future. All of you millennials are the future. You will shape the future. My generation was horrified by what would happen when we shaped the future, and it's here now. And they had right to be nervous, because look what it's become. You blame it. To me, in my mind, you have to put the blame where it belongs. And in this case, where else could it possibly be other than with the generation that raised us? Would be my parents, the greatest generation, I guess they called them. And then you had Generation X, excuse me. Anyway, look deep into these things that she said, and remember, they're the Hegelian dialectic, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, or problem, reaction, solution. They come up, they have something they want to accomplish, so they instigate a scenario that actually has the people calling out and desiring the result that they originally wanted. And Hegel didn't care how far around the block you had to go to get there. He just, the idea was only to control the populace. And listen, for people like Alex Jones and whatnot that want to say, they give you the idea that it was Edward Bernays had something to do with this. Go away, Alex Jones. Edward Bernays lived to be 106 years old. He did help the United States convince the public that we needed to take over Panama, but that was his job. He was a public relations guru and really invented it. He got women smoking with torches of freedom. He was a great, intelligent old Jew. Check in Edward Bernays. But he also got into propaganda. I'm not saying, even, Oppenheimer and Einstein. You know, they invented the bomb. Does that make him all bad? What about Nobel? He invented dynamite. Does that make him all bad? Well, this is going a bit long. I'm probably going to load it up tonight. I encourage you to go and see the people that are down in my description. Check out their channels, because like Honey Badger said, it's not for my own personal gain or glory, but I would like to get, you know, as many subscribers as I can, so that I can get the truth out there, so that I can at least give you another opinion, and it will be my idea of the truth. Always remember that. Remember what Honey Badger said. When you present facts to someone that is embroiled and steeped in dogma, it only strengthens that dogma that they have. You can see to my upper left here that this is my page, and there'll be you're there right now. I encourage you to go back and look at some of my older videos. I have some on Pizzagate, and I mock Ashley Judd and Madonna and a few other people, and just basically have a good time. So I just encourage you right now to, you know, swing on by, since it's the end of the video. Whether you like it or not, it's always a little strange. I'll probably always say that. It doesn't really, you know, like it if you'd like to, whatever. Downvote it if you want to. But go ahead and subscribe would be very important to me. And tell your friends, even if you disagree with what I'm saying. You know, let's have a diversity of ideas and come together, have a meeting of the minds. And hopefully, that said, you can look forward to a live stream between me and a very up-and-coming, very popular YouTuber that he's great. I call him Boss. And, you know, I'm also planning on a cyber debate with an Englishman that I mention quite often on this. So keep a lookout for that. And remember, be good to your family, be good to your friends, be good to your loved ones. Be quick to say you're sorry. Be even quicker to accept an apology, especially when that thing that your friend, family member, or loved one has done seems to be so big. Because, listen, people, in a moment that you think not, your friends, your family members, your loved ones, your life and your cause, they're going to depart from you. Oh no, lights out. I'm gonna punch your lights out. Get up, bitch, and guard your grill. There's something going on and I can't sit still. I've been drinking and busting too. I've been thinking of busting you upside your motherfucking head if your friends jump in. Oh girl, there'll be more dead and move, bitch. Get out the way, bitch. Get out the way and move. Or just move. Move, bitch. Get out the way.